Leaders of the UK and the EU will meet for dinner this evening that could pave the way to a post-Brexit trade agreement or send both sides towards a chaotic no-deal scenario. German Chancellor Angela Merkel expects talks to continue for days to come and that a deal won't be ready in time for an EU summit on Thursday. Both sides still disagree on the key sticking points that have stalled talks all year. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says a deal is still there to be done, but that the EU must compromise.
Our friends in the EU are currently insisting that if they pass a new law in the future with which we in this country do not comply or don't follow suit, then they want the automatic right, Mr. Speaker, to punish us and to retaliate. And secondly, they're saying that the UK should be the only country in the world not to have sovereign control over its fishing waters. And I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, that those are terms that any Prime Minister of this country should accept.
So Boris Johnson in Brussels for dinner with Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Will be waiting to see what comes out of the talks. In just a moment, we'll be talking to Tag and Wright in London about what Boris Johnson had to say before leaving. But first, let's go to Brussels and speak to our correspondent, Jack Parrock. Jack, leaders meeting tonight. What exactly are we expecting to come out of this dinner?
Well, there are dampened hopes, to be honest with you, Annalise, that this is the dinner that is going to unlock these Brexit trade negotiations. We have had some positive news over the last few days with the United Kingdom ending its controversial aspects that in an internal market bill that was basically going to breach parts of the withdrawal agreement that it had signed with the European Union a year ago. But essentially what Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen have asked their chief negotiators to do is to give them an overview of the sticking points and where these clash moments, where these flashpoints between the two sides are at. They will sit down to dinner this evening. They will know that EU leaders are meeting in Brussels Thursday, Friday as well. But all sides are saying pretty much at the moment that while a deal still is possible, this might not be the moment where it is pushed over the line.
Now, Tig, a couple of hours ago, we saw Boris Johnson in Parliament showing little sign of wanting to compromise.
Yeah, that's right, Annalise. It sounded as if he was heading off into battle, and I suppose in many ways he is. His speech to MPs laden with the kind of rhetorical flourish which has served him pretty well in his career in journalism and then subsequently in politics. And no, it didn't sound like he was leaving much room to compromise, although you could hardly expect him to head off into battle by saying, I will give some ground. But of course, we all know you can dress up compromise with the right words to try and sell it back home to your base. And there is precedent here. I thought it was interesting, one particular turn of phrase he used, that the EU's demands were something no Prime Minister could accept. And those exact words were used by his predecessor, Theresa May, once when discussing the Irish backstop. And look where we got to with that. And Boris Johnson, as Foreign Secretary, resigned that job in protest at the Irish backstop, only subsequently to accept it and try to rebadge it as a victory. So we know that a lot of creative language can be used to get these deals over the line. Boris Johnson is pretty good at that. The EU is pretty good at that too. And he did strike a positive note too. He said that a good deal is still there to be done, even if the mood music coming from elsewhere is sounding a little less cheerful. Annalise?
And Jack, one more question to you. What's the mood like in Brussels? Are people actually optimistic that a deal could be reached?
Well, as you know, Annalise, here in Brussels, this is how it works, essentially. The pressure mounts and mounts and mounts, and we get these moments when the negotiations reach fever pitch. And I think we're really in that this week at the moment. We know that a deal needs to be signed off in order for it to be ratified in the relevant parliaments. Firstly, in the Parliament in Westminster, but also in the European Parliament. And for that, it needs to be translated into the EU's 24 languages. And that is why there's there's so much time pressure in order to get the deal in place so that it can be signed off before the 31st of December, when the end of the Brexit transition comes. Now, to discuss this a little bit further with me, I have an MEP who will be voting on any potential trade deal between the United Kingdom and the European Union. Christoph Hansen, you also sit with the European Parliament's Brexit Committee. What's your assessment? Are we at this moment now where it's so high pressured, the intensity is so high that a deal is likely to be done? Or do you feel that we're staring down the barrel of a no-deal situation?
Well, I believe that tonight probably it is a good sign that Boris Johnson is here in Brussels to discuss further with Ursula von der Leyen. I think this demonstrates that he's still, I hope so, committed to get a deal, because this would be definitely the best outcome for both sides. That there is no doubt about that. But on the other hand, I don't believe that tonight will be something concrete coming out. It will maybe be a further push to the negotiators to finally come to the landing zones. I think the landing zones are well known, but therefore to get there, there is some goodwill of both sides needed to get this agreement finally done. Time is, of course, running out. We are in the injury time. That is clear as well. So we have to make sure that in this injury time, we are not going for a bad deal. I think that is something we definitely should avoid. And I think Boris Johnson hasn't come to Brussels for flogging a dead horse. I think that is not what is happening. So I believe we still now have some days left. But as you rightly said, the time is running out to get this done properly in a legal, sound manner to get this deal ratified by the end of the year.
Now, it's a very interesting timing of this meeting. This is one evening, a dinner, just before the EU leaders are coming for their summit, an in-person summit, which is probably going to be almost dominated by Brexit. I wonder what your assessment is. Do you think perhaps some of the big players in the European Union, Emmanuel Macron in France and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, they've sort of stood slightly further out on this than they did when the withdrawal agreement was being negotiated? Do you think their influence could have changed the situation? Do you think it's them that need to get involved in order to push a deal over the line?
Well, as you know, the deal or the discussion on Brexit are not on the agenda of the council meeting properly said. So I think probably the Commission President will debrief member states about her dinner tonight, but I think there is not a concrete discussion. She will probably as well use the opportunity to discuss certain flexibilities with the bigger and concerned member states who have to give some more commitments probably to get this deal done by the end of the year. But on the other hand, I believe it is not the time to give now a premature Christmas gift away as well. That is something that has to be said as well. And we are, of course, hoping to get further progress. This would be important because if we are not moving further and going to the really final phase, we will be in the scenario of either a provisional application, which of course is not the ideal scenario, or to have a no deal by the end of the year. This would be a disaster for the businesses and for our citizens on both sides. Yeah,
talking of citizens, what are the practical things that you think citizens can expect if there is no trade deal between the EU and the UK? How much harm could it do to businesses and to the pockets of citizens in the European Union?
Well, it's not just in the European Union. I think that the effects will be on both sides. We know that the United Kingdom is exporting 43% of their goods to the European Union. So there will be traffic jams at the border because that's something the UK government as well clearly announced. So there will be major disruptions with the deal or without a deal. I think that has to be made clear again. The situation, the good cooperation we had before, there will be additional barriers, and this will have a cost to businesses. We hear that lorries are prepared or have been prepared by the UK government that they might be for 2 days longer in the queues and in the traffic jams at the borders because the infrastructure is more heavy than it has been before. And this, of course, can bring major disruptions in the logistic chain, and there will be delays. There will be goods that will not achieve their destiny. So the impact will be massive.
Christoph Hansen, who is a member of the European Parliament for Luxembourg and sits in the Brexit steering group, thank you so much for your time this evening on Euronews. So as you see there, Annelies, the stakes are high in these Brexit trade talks. Ursula von der Leyen and Boris Johnson sitting down to dinner here in Brussels this evening.
Jack Parrock in Brussels and Tag Enright in London, thank you very much for that update.